Hello everyone. So this is after the week 13. I hope that everybody is well and having a nice time in the sun. I apologise for any noise in the background. Our next door neighbours are having lots of scaffolding put up over their house. So I apologise if there's any noise, but I'll just carry on. The first question I've got for you is that last week I showed you, at the first slide, showed an artist that was working with a particular material, and I wondered if you'd worked out what that material was. So she basically uses ceramic materials that she's actually broken up, and then she makes an artwork from broken ceramic. That particular work was called The Big Peony and the Peeping Tom. I don't know whether that resonates with you, whether you liked it. It was very interesting. I'm sure quite difficult to assemble, but was very, very effective. And obviously you can see that a peony is a flower with lots and lots of petals. They almost look like roses, but they're not quite. You could tell that with the way she'd arranged all the ceramic pieces, that they look like they're very tight buds with lots of petals. Okay, so that was last week. This week, on my first slide for week 13, this artist is very interesting. She makes very large paintings on canvases. Her name is Lola Donahue, and she is a contemporary artist, so she's working now. I'll just read you a quote as to what she says about her work. She says, "My paintings are personal reflections and interpretations. They are always an emerging process. I like when I discover things by accident, and I usually let this dictate the direction of the painting. They generally evolve through a subtractive process, beginning with lots of colour and bold, vigorous brushstrokes, and then working backwards, so to speak. I add both thick and transparent layers, allowing for the underpainting to shine through. A lot of the time I find myself working more in the negative space than the positive." So that is her view about her work. This work is called Heirloom. I think there are about 20 paintings that she's made with the theme of heirloom. Perhaps you can look closely at it and think what is it she's trying to say. Perhaps she's not trying to say anything. I really like the colours. I like the way certain shapes actually do shine through. So she talks about this transparent layer that she puts over. So she's basically layering paint, but there are certain colours that stand out still despite the layering. So that is my first slide. My next slide, which is my art of the week, this piece of art is called The Wayfarer Above a Sea of Fog. It was painted in 1818, and you can tell it's quite old because if you look really carefully, the canvas or the paint has cracked quite a bit, so it looks like it's old. And it's by an artist. His name is Caspar David Frederick. And I'll read you the story connected with this picture. It's called Rocks and Stones and Trees. "Of course, choose whichever one you want," Caspar David Frederick smiles. "It's the 4th or 5th time this week that his neighbour's young daughter, Elsie, has knocked at his studio door. Each time she has the same request. 'Please, sir, may I look at the scratches?' 'Sketches,' she corrects her. She likes the sketches with animals or birds in them. He always lets her pick one to take home. Yesterday she chose a drawing with a spider's web. All she can find this morning is a pile of rocks with a stunted tree and a miserable old crow perched in its branches. Her face lights up. Children understand life better than we do," thinks Frederick, when she's gone. "They see things with their own eyes. They haven't yet been taught what to like and what not to like. What does Elsie do with her sketches? Perhaps she invents stories for them. Once upon a time there was a wise old crow. He returns to the painting on his easel, a man standing on the summit of a mountain, looking into the distance. The idea came to him in a dream. As soon as he woke up, he made a small drawing in the notebook he keeps beside his bed. He has copied the picture onto a canvas, very lightly in ink. He has made it bigger, and it will change in other ways too as he works on it. But it is still the picture he saw in his dream. You must see a painting in your soul before you can see it with your eyes, he tells his friends. Frederick's studio is a bare room in a house on the edge of Dresden. Bare wooden floors, bare walls, window, chair, easel, that's it, except for the sketches spread out on the floor. He did most of these on the walking trip in the mountains east of Dresden. They'll be useful for his new painting, reminding him of the exact shapes of the sandstone peaks and rocky slopes. Yes, he can see the landscape clearly, the rocks worn into fantastic shapes by wind and rain. One looked just like a bear. Another resembled the side of a man's face, with the nose and the chin jutting out. The figure he's painting is himself, exactly as he appeared in the dream. He was wearing his best velvet coat, not his old walking clothes, but he wasn't at a party or a wedding. He was alone in the mountains. Frederick uses a very fine brush to paint his hair, blowing slightly in the breeze. He feels as if he stepped outside himself. What is the figure thinking as he stares into the distance? Frederick should know. And yet, he can't put those thoughts into words. It's like trying to reach and touch the horizon. One time when Frederick was walking in the mountains with Franz, his old school friend and hiking companion, they spent the night at an inn. When they woke, grey fog pressed at the windows. They could see nothing. He set off anyway, along the forest path that led up to the mountain. Cold fog clung to the branches. The only sound was the snapping of twigs underfoot. At last they emerged into open stony ground. Fog rolled around them, sometimes thicker, sometimes thinning away, as though the sun were trying to break through. Then, all at once, they walked out of the fog into clear air. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It feels like we're kings of the world, Franz said at last. I don't feel like a king, Frederick was thoughtful. I feel as though we are the only men alive. There is only us, and, he looked around, as far as they could see, rocky outcrops rose through the fog. In the furthest great distance, grey mountains merged with the pale sky and the soul of nature. Franz knelt down, rummaging in his rucksack. Don't tell me we forgot the bread and cheese. I'm starving. Frederick remembers that morning, stepping out of the fog and into the sunlight. He felt that he was seeing the world for the first time through fresh eyes. It's easier to feel that way on a mountain than here in his studio, to be sure. Where's the drawing he made of those rocks, like the man's face? He can't find it anywhere. Ah, Elsie must have taken it. Tell me, he says the next time Elsie pops her head round the door. What do you do with my sketches? Are you making a little book of stories? Oh no, sir. The thought has obviously never occurred to her. I use them to wrap up my toys. Okay, so that's the story about that particular picture. So he'd obviously had a dream, and when he woke up, he jotted down the dream that he'd had, but it seems to be like almost a recollection of his walk with his friend Franz in the mountains. So Dresden, you could try and find out a little bit about Dresden. It's quite an important town, particularly in the war. But it is in Germany, so he's obviously able to get access to the mountains from his studio, and he's gone walking with his friend, and that's what they've seen. And I don't know about you, but sometimes when I go for a walk, sometimes I do see shapes around me and imagine that they're various things. Another thing that you can do is when you're perhaps out in the garden or lying out in the sun, if you look at the clouds in the sky, you can sometimes see lots of different shapes that look like things that you might recognise. Okay, so that is my art of the week. The next art is by a photographer. So her name is Bernice Abbott, and she was around in America. She died, I think, in the 1990s, but she was quite a prolific photographer in Manhattan, in New York. So the energy, life and scale of New York City inspired the photographer Bernice Abbott. Many of her black and white photographs focused on the shape, designs and textures of the city's architecture, its cobblestone streets, elevated trains, storefronts and tall buildings. She took photographs from different perspectives, looking down on the glowing lights at night from rooftops, up at the city's towers from the street, and through the roaring arches of a train station. So that particular picture the photograph that I've shown you is Broadway and Exchange Place in Manhattan, and it was taken in 1936. So think about cameras then, they would not be particularly well developed. So she'd obviously have to make the picture on film, go back to a studio and then develop it. But she's looking at different perspectives. So she's looking, she's looking up at buildings. She's looking at, as I said in the little intro, she's looking at textures in her environment. So what I want you to do, or perhaps you could do, is that you could go out on one of your walks and take either a camera or a phone with you and photograph a place from different points of view. I mean, you could actually go outside your house as well and do it that way. So what you need is the camera or smartphone and some thin cardboard, about 4 by 6 inches, and some scissors. So before you start to take photographs, what you need to do is to make a viewfinder. Now, you will remember that I've had these in the classroom. They've been in black card, where I've cut a small hole inside the card, and then so it allows you to look really closely at different objects. So before you take the photographs, make a viewfinder by cutting a rectangle out of the card or the thin card, and take it with you to scout for a location. So you can use the viewfinder to look at various places and sort of focus and home in on a really good view, or a very unusual perspective or aspect of a building, or could be outside in the park. So you might want to look up, you might want to try and look down at things and take photographs that way. So look for a place just outside your house or flat, or on your street or in your neighbourhood. Using your viewfinder, look for interesting shapes, lines, textures and shadows. Start taking photographs. Vary what you include in the frame and what you leave out. Zoom in on objects to capture details and textures. Step back to include more of what's around it. Try different angles, crouch down low, look up, or climb up and look down. So choose your favourite pictures and share them with your family or friends. So you doing it this way, you notice things that you hadn't actually seen before. It's a really clever way of making you really focus. If you haven't got any card, then what you can do is you can use your hands. So if you get your index finger and your thumb of both hands, so, and then make a square with them and then look through it, so you can use that as your viewfinder. And what a viewfinder does is that it's a tool that frames a small section of what you see in front of you. So it's really good at getting you to look really closely at things. So perhaps you'd like to send me your photograph so that I can see what you've actually been what photographs you've been taking. The other thing you could then do is when you've got the photograph at home, get a piece of paper and a pencil and then try to draw the picture, draw the photograph, then looking at perspective, thinking about things that are far away from you are going to be a lot smaller, things that are close to you are going to be a lot larger, and think about where you need to place different things, because obviously you can't see because we can only see in front and to a sort of 60-degree angle. So you obviously can't see everything. You can't see the stuff that's behind you. So think about your focus. Think about your perspective. Think about what you can see in that sort of line of vision, and have fun with that. And I look forward to making Art of the Week number 14. Thanks a lot. See you soon.